Hey guys, Roxbox90 here with another deconstructing YouTube EDH Commander decks. This one is RaccoonPunter's Stonebrow Krosan Hero EDH deck. So the colors obviously are gruel colors, which is red and green. It's automatically aggro colors. Just depends on how you do it. So Stonebrow is very much into big trampling creatures. So that's what his ability's main function is for this sort of deck. So that's kind of what he's had in plan. His plan is to have lots of creatures, preferably with trample, preferably getting haste, and beating face. Pretty straightforward concept. Let's see how he did in my opinion. So lands-wise, I always start with lands first. It's just the way I tend to build my decks. Command Tower's fine. Copperland Gorge. Scar's lands I'm not the biggest fan of because you have to get them in your opening hand, otherwise they hit play tapped guaranteed. I don't see on your list Grove or Burn Willows. That's a fairly reasonable budget land. That would be a good replacement for those colors. Obviously, besides for the dual, there's also the red and green filter. That is something Thicket, I think it's called. I forget what it is exactly, but you definitely want that in here, no question. And that's not terribly expensive either. Evolving Wilds is fine. You have a lot of basics, so being able to pick one is fine. Bounce Land, once again, is also fine. It's clearly, if it's budget, this is a card you want to run. If it's not budget, then you might just want more of the dual, the more expensive dual cards. So Plateau, I think, is his colors, but it's a fine budgetary card. Holy Bandlord is great. Even though it hits play tapped, I like what its ability does for this sort of deck. Highland Yield hits play tapped, it's another duel. You want to try not to hit play tapped, especially because you want your land open for use. A lot of basics. Good. Rootbound Crags, great card. Shinka, I don't think you need first strike so much on Stonebrow, but it doesn't hit play tapped, so it basically is a mountain, so I think that's fine. Stomping Ground, of course, good shock. As I said, like shock and dual are, of course, both preferred if you can. If you can't, Plateau is not a terribly expensive dual. Stomping Grounds, though, I think that's great. False God's a great ramp card and this sort of thing. Terramorphic Expanse, same sort of thing as Evolving Wilds. Good choice. Treetop Village, a lot of people run it. Hits play tapped, though, which is a bit frustrating, but I like that it can turn into a creature, and with Stonebrow can be pretty good beater. So let's go right into the creatures. We have Acidic Slime, which is just good utility. Anger is important in this deck, I think, because it gives haste to all your creatures. Haste and trample. Basically every big creature in the deck should have a variant of haste, trample, or both, although preferably trample. And giving haste to large creatures would be nice. So let's see. So Vortex Leech is always good. Bigger, badder, stronger. Brawn is, I think, in some ways even more important than Anger because it gives everything trample. Question is, if you have most of your creatures have trample in and of themselves, I don't know if you need Brawn as much, to be honest. You might want something like Primal Rage, which is a 2 green card, all creatures you control have trample. It might be a little more better than Brawn. Brawn to Ethereum, a lot of people run it. The Provoke is pretty powerful and has trample. I still think you could have something that's better, but it's a fine card. It works. Chameleon Colossus, it's a nice card. This is an MVP in this deck, of course, because it gives trample to all the creatures and X+X. It's probably an instant win, about 90% of the time. Nice card. Days of Calamity is really good, because you destroy target land. It's not just sacrifice a land, so you get to blow up the land you want. Very good. Elder Scale Worm, I don't think you really need it. Of course, it's a nice big beater card. There might be better cards to choose from overall than Elder Scale Worm, because Elder Scale Worm pretty much, it's a 7/7 trample for 7, and its abilities are both pretty much useless because you're an aggro deck. You're probably going to win on the life front of things. It's okay. It's fine. But I think there could be better cards. Companion is it's fine. It's kind of weak. And you're probably not going to land in the first couple turns because it's too green. But whatever. It's probably not an ideal pick. I'm sure there's something. I'm sure you prefer a utility creature than trying to make a beater out of something small. Garruk's Horde is fantastic because you get to play creatures. So see, this sort of thing is more utility-wise. It's not just a 7/7 trample. I like that. Instigator Gang is fine. I don't know if it's worth it to have him flipping to 3+0, but you have to skip a turn, basically. I don't know if that's worth it for what he does, to be honest. And your opponents are always going to be playing spells, so I don't know if that's worth it. Shroud, Trample, 6/4, just a classic beater. I think it's fine if you're just trying to make a beater list, then it's definitely a decent pick. Mulgraf Monstrosity is nice. I like that it replaces itself. That's pretty good in this sort of deck. The Ooze, I don't like. I see that it's indestructible and that it can get big quickly. If it's going to be removed, the indestructible doesn't matter as much, and I think the 3 green is fairly hefty, given your not necessarily perfect mana curve. So it's an okay pick. You might want something better. Titan, of course, is super important, which brings me back to the lands. I don't know why you're not running Kessig Wolfrun or Valakut, because both of those I think would be phenomenal in this sort of deck. And you probably should run them if you're running Primeval. Because Kessig Wolfrun gives Trample and X+0, fantastic, and Valakut with Primeval and your other searches, it's just always an MVP in EDH. So in this sort of deck, so I would run them if you can fit them somehow. And of course, Primeval Titan is obvious. Balot's really nice, especially because you get a bunch of creatures with him just by the ramp, and his power is just totally worth it. Rapacious One, I think this is just a filler card that you want to have in here. Sure, it gives you the ramp, but by that time I don't think you need it. I think it's just a filler creature, and I'm sure you can do better. Silvo's powerful, regenerating, pretty fine. He's pretty good. Sombrewald Sage is good in this sort of deck because you are playing lots of creatures. Stonebrow, of course. Terastodon doesn't have Trample, but of course Terastodon's awesome. I would probably run Woodfall Primus in this deck over Terastodon for that reason, because Woodfall Primus has Trample on his own and does a similar sort of thing to Terastodon. But it's really up to you. Terra Stomper is just flat out beater. He's an 8/8 Trample for 6, pretty strong. I think it's pretty good. Thunderblast, everyone runs Thunderblast in these sort of decks. He's fantastic because he gives himself haste. Chances are you'll give him Trample, and if you don't when he dies, then he'll just get even stronger with Stonebrow. So he's phenomenal. Verdant Force, I don't see why you really need it. Sure, he makes saplings, but I think he's just a filler. So I mean, I would definitely pull him out for something like a Chroma. Vigor is nice in this sort of deck. Of course, it does correlate with your deal damage to all creatures. I see that he works with that, and that's pretty cool. But he's a pretty good pick. Vorinclex is, of course, good. Pain in the ass, but I can see why you'd want to run him. Treefolk, lots of people use. I think he's fine. I like that you can recur him for free, pretty much. Wilderness Elemental is just very powerful trampler for 3. I think he's good on your curve. Let's go through the sorceries quickly. So Cultivate's obvious. You have a bunch of basics. Same thing with Vegetation. Green Sun Zenith's always good in this sort of decks. Savagery is pretty powerful, I think, in this deck particularly, with the amount of ramp you have. Even if you could throw it on Stonebrow, making him like a 16 beater from one turn to the next, very powerful. Reach, of course, you want lots of ramp, so that makes sense. I don't think you need this card, to be honest. I mean, your guys trampling haste huge creatures. I don't think you have to worry about them blocking. So I wouldn't run that. Overrun's good. Stampede's even better in this deck. Rampant Growth's fine, especially on your curve. Regrowth's good. Revenge of the Hunt is a little limited in that it only does 1 creature, but it does make them block it, so that could be a win in of itself. Twister, I would probably run something like Starstorm, just because it gives you the option to cycle, and maybe run more than 1 sweeper if you're going to be running it. Maybe 1 more. Maybe just run Starstorm and Savage Twister back to back. Seize the Day is really good because it has a flashback and it gives you an extra step. That's why Trader's Blood I don't think is as good. I think you would something like the aggressive something from New Phyrexia. That's haste. I'm sorry, not haste. It's an instant speed steal for the same sort of thing. Even though it costs a little more, I think it's a better card in this deck. tooth and nail, of course. Any sort of green, red aggro, fantastic card, especially with what you have going on here. Triumph of the Horde is pretty much an instant win if it lands on the field for this deck. Good choice. Beast Within is great. I don't know why you have these cards here. Blunt the Assault, Fog, Tangle Sap, these like prevent damage. I mean, Tangle Sap maybe I understand. Fog and Blunt the Assault, I don't at all. I would just pull them out. You're the beater here. You're the scary guy. I don't think you have to worry about preventing combat damage. Savage Beating is fantastic. Primal Hunter, you also, I think you want to run Sarkinvol in here for sure. He gives haste and he steals creatures. I think he's fantastic for this sort of deck. So I'd run Sarkinvol here too. Enchantments, Asceticism is pretty good, I think, in this deck, particularly with so many creatures. Beastmasters is so powerful, so powerful. Fervor gives haste everything. That's why I'd run Primal Rage, which as well, because it's like the trample version of this, and it's cheaper. Gratuitous Violence is fantastic, especially given you're going to beat them face. Although I don't know if you need it, it's kind of like overkill in some ways. Web of War, of course, is fantastic. Lignify is kind of useless. I would run something like Aftershock instead of Lignify. Cruel Signet's fine. Lightning Greave's good. Warhammer's pretty powerful. Soul Ring, Weathersea Totem, I think that all works. So as I said, there's like some cards to pull out, some cards to reconsider. So just some ideas. Rancor is, I think, a really nice pick for this sort of deck. You might want to consider that. Here's Primal Rage I was talking about. Creature to control or trample. Woodfall Primus, as I mentioned, is fantastic. Don't underestimate Gaia's Revenge. I think it's a really powerful card. Really powerful, especially in the deck you're running. You might also want to run something like Strip Mine and Tech Edge and stuff to hurt your opponent's stuff so that they don't have the same sort of lead in terms of utility land. Then the other thing I think you're missing maybe is some tutors. You might want to put more than Green Sun. You might want to put something like Fauna Shaman or something in there as well. Aggravated Assault is a phenomenal card. It gives you multiple attack phases on whim. I think that's great. Fire's Maya must go in the deck, in my opinion. Basically gives creatures haste and it can boost up a creature for a final last couple points of damage. I think that's great. Here's some big scary creatures. Avatar of Slaughter. All creatures have double strike and attack. Basically means you win if you play him. Chroma is amazing. Balefire Dragon. Like that sort of thing. Like think big. Hellkite Charger, etc. And then there was also some card draw, because I noticed you're kind of missing that. So something like Triumph of Ferocity is fantastic for you because your deck's always going to have the highest guy in the food chain. I think that's a fantastic card to go with. Also, I noticed you didn't have Urbrask. He's kind of fantastic for this deck. Fan-freaking-tastic. It is also a fantastic land. Very cheap, fantastic. On a land, on a stick, on a land, you get Trample. Bam. Insurrection means you win the game. Pretty much guaranteed. Just it gives you, it's untap and you beat the face. And kind of the same thing with, where's that card? Right, and then I mentioned Aftershock as a good removal. So, I'm just pulling these sort of examples from mtgsalvation.com. So I would definitely use that if you want to check your deck against other decks of the like. Those are just a couple examples that snapped my eye when I was just glancing through, seeing what other Stonebrow decks are like, since I never played against one or used one myself. But I think your deck overall is pretty solid. You have a pretty good idea. You got some of the staples. I think the deck seems to be pretty good, just not knowing it well. So your curve-wise, I think is pretty solid. It's definitely not as competitive as it could be, because you have very little on the ramp end of things that way. You probably would run things like Birds and Lattimore Elves and stuff of that nature if you were really concerned about getting Stonebrow turn like 3 or 4. So I think it's not as competitive as it could be, though I don't know if that's what you want. So it seems to be just a generally pretty good deck. Curve seems pretty good. So yeah, those are my thoughts. So RaccoonPunter. I hope this code overview helps you, and you'll let me know if it with feedback as well from anyone else. If you have any thoughts on the way my videos are going, or the decks I'm doing, or anything about the videos, feel free to comment below or PM me. I'm always happy to hear your thoughts and answer any questions. So thank you for letting me use and show your deck, and thanks for watching, everyone. Roxbox90 signing out. I'll see you guys in the next video.